In business, Bank Indonesia Governor Perry Warjiyo has stepped down, citing personal reasons. The central bank reaffirming its commitment to maintaining monetary stability. Senior Deputy Governor Destry Damayanti will serve as acting governor while the government begins the process of appointing a permanent successor. The country's equity market ending the day marginally in the red, while the rupiah lost ground against the US dollar. The rupiah has been breaking past the psychologically important 18,000 mark at points from June. CNA's senior correspondent Saiful Bara Ismail with this report.
Mr. Perry's surprise departure was announced by State Secretary Prasetyo Hadi on Monday morning. Mr. Prasetyo said President Prabowo Subianto has accepted the resignation and expressed his gratitude for Mr. Perry's nearly 7 years of service leading Bank Indonesia.
Kami mewakili pemerintah menyampaikan kepada seluruh masyarakat bahwa marilah kita terus menjalankan tugas kita sesuai dengan kewenangan kita yang sudah diberikan oleh undang-undang, di mana BI memiliki peranan untuk menjaga moneter kita, sementara pemerintah dalam hal ini Kementerian Keuangan juga menjalankan fungsi menjaga fiskal.
Mr. Perry was first appointed governor in 2018 and began a second five-year term in 2023. He played a key role in stabilizing the rupiah during this year's global market turbulence. Under his leadership, Bank Indonesia raised its benchmark interest rate to 5.75% in June to stem capital outflow. The central bank then held the rate steady in July while introducing new financial incentives and lowering foreign exchange hedging costs. Financial markets reacted nervously to news of Mr. Perry's resignation, with Indonesian assets experiencing immediate volatility. Acting Governor Destry Damayanti sought to reassure investors, saying the central bank would continue to uphold strong institutional governance. She also pledged to maintain close coordination with the government while respecting the independence and mandates of each institution.
Bank Indonesia akan selalu senantiasa memastikan keberlangsungan tugas dan wewenang untuk mencapai stabilitas nilai tukar rupiah, memelihara stabilitas sistem pembayaran, dan turut menjaga stabilitas sistem keuangan dalam rangka mendukung pertumbuhan ekonomi yang berkelanjutan yang dapat menciptakan lingkungan ekonomi yang kondusif.
Perry Warjiyo's departure marks the second high-profile resignation in President Prabowo Subianto's administration in less than a week. Last Thursday, Nanik S. Dayang, head of Indonesia's closely watched $15 billion free meals program, also stepped down from her role at the National Nutrition Agency. The government is expected to move quickly to appoint a permanent head for Bank Indonesia in an effort to reassure markets. However, that won't happen overnight. Under Indonesia's legislative process, the president must first nominate a candidate who will then undergo a parliamentary fit and proper test before lawmakers vote to approve the appointment. Saiful Bara Ismail, CNA, Jakarta.
Well, we have Ms. Radhika Rao, Executive Director and Senior Economist at DBS Bank. She joins us. Ms. Rao, whatever reasons Perry Warjiyo might have had, this is not a good timing in terms of stability and confidence in Indonesia's economy.
Hi, Jesus. Certainly, I think this was an unexpected development. I think it hit the markets about early Monday. Of course, the outgoing governor has cited personal reasons. I think to make sure there's a good succession plan, the government has already announced the Deputy Governor Destry as his successor as an interim head. Just like the reporter mentioned, the formal process still requires the president, who will then nominate someone to the the lower house, and then that will be approved. And the board will also be involved in that process. The Indonesian markets had begun to stabilize in the past few weeks. Of course, it had helped that the oil prices and the geopolitical tensions had also gone down till about early July before we had another week of re-escalation. But this time around, in fact, dollar rupiah did not react the same way that it did in the first round. The currency was relatively, stable. I think because that comes in the back of BI's move to hike rates by 100 basis points in May and June. At the same time, you've also seen some affirmative comments by S&P, on the ratings outlook. So all of these reasons really did help stabilize the bond markets, and it also helped stabilize the currency as well. And the outgoing governor, certainly has had a very, I think he's played a very pivotal role. He took office in 2018, and he's seen through quite a few transitions, political transition. He's also seen through the pandemic, more recently the West Asia tensions. So, and he's held that with a steady hand. He put in place a mix of policy tools, rates, as well as non-rate measures. And most recently, in fact, the BI met last week, and he had also outlined some of the non-rate measures, which included hedging support to provide a much more holistic policy approach.
So you mentioned, for example, the war in Iran. So external factors, those are beyond Indonesia's control, but there were some perceived, perhaps, missteps within the country on policy, and that has stabilized away from what could be considered a spiral, negative spiral, good news, bad news, all mixing into what became a relatively negative narrative. But that has been dispelled. But this latest development, that might put paid to that perceived stability.
Certainly, I think what had happened perhaps in the last year or so, and then in the last 6 months particularly, was that there were just a bunch of developments that were feeding into each other. You mentioned negative spiral. So, there were fiscal worries, and then there were two rating agencies that had come out to downgrade Indonesia's rating outlook. And at the same time, you had an international index provider, which had also, put some restrictions on the domestic equity index. So all of these feeding into each other, and it did not certainly help that the global factors were completely unfavorable during this entire period, especially in the second quarter of the year. But since then, say into June and July, you've really seen a bit of a turnaround. You have seen the narrative around the fiscal policy actually turn a lot more conducive. The government has emphasized that they would prefer to keep to the fiscal deficit targets, keep within the 3% of GDP, red line, so to speak. And at the same time, they've actually signaled that the flagship schemes, welfare schemes, which was taking up a big chunk of the budget earlier, is going to be down by a third. And like I mentioned earlier, S&P, making positive comments. You've also got MSCI that had pushed its review to November. So all these things really did help and, kind of contain and stabilize the domestic markets. I think this one is certainly a new development. A knee-jerk reaction certainly going to be, negative, because one doesn't know the incoming, governor, he or she, how they're going to direct policy, balance of domestic as well as fiscal policies, and as well as, are they going to maintain the kind of coordination that they have done with the government and the government's welfare schemes, for example.
Oh, that's a final question here. The appointment of Destry Damayanti to stress as acting Bank Indonesia governor, this appointment seen as immediately very reassuring to domestic and external investors. Final question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Destry is a very steady hand. I think she's been, also been in the central bank for about 6-7 years. Very seasoned. She's been an economist. She's also has had technocrat, background. She's been in part of the regulators as well. So not surprisingly, I think having a very smooth transition to the interim head does bode favorably, does bring about signal stability. And I think it's going to be it'll take a few days, if not weeks, for the new head to be named. And until then, I think she's really a steady pair of hands at the top office. More importantly, she was involved in the existing framework of how the policy was run, even coming up with an instrument, SRBIs. I do remember hearing her talk about the need to maintain positive rate differentials, these short-term instruments that were introduced by BI, to draw in flows, all of that she was an integral part of. So it does bode very well for continuity. And I think markets will wait to see whether she or someone else takes over the helm once the legislative process is complete.
Oh, thanks. Radhika Rao, they're looking at the surprise resignation of the governor of Indonesia Central Bank. She's Ms. Rao's Executive Director and Senior Economist at DBS Bank. Thank you.